group members go, you are the only one here so far. So we will give the other folks just a few minutes. We wrapped up the PEB board meeting not too long ago. So people I'm sure will be trickling in. Yeah, it looks like Tom just arrived.
So where do I turn off the camera? And because you're not going to want to see me change out my medical supplies here. So I want to go dark.
Well, there should be an icon with a camera at the top. Like, you know, if you look at the top of your screen, is there a bar with menu options?
Okay, there it is. It was covered by something else. Okay, I'll wait till after we've opened the meeting.
Okay, sounds good. And I see Tom is here. Hi, Tom. It's good to see you. And still waiting for Kimberly, Sean, and JJ.
Did I see a message from Sean saying he had a conflict?
I had that message from him last week related to a meeting last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now. You're making me question. No, I don't believe so. Not related to today's meeting, but I know we did have one last week that that occurred.
Neither of us made it.
That's okay. It happens.
I'm continuing to get notification I have poor network quality. Of course, that's after I ended up getting a new modem. So I'll try participating as much as I can.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for the advance notice.
Yeah, and I have my cell phone with me, so if I have to call in, I can do that.
Okay. All right, it looks like Kimberly just joined. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello.
And we've got Tom and Jeff. So just Sean and JJ are the only folks. And it looks like Sean maybe just hopped on. There he is. All right. So we have 4 of 5 work group members present at this point. Jeff, if you want to go ahead and open the meeting whenever you're ready, we can get started. And then hopefully, yeah, and I was going to say, and JJ will hopefully join soon.
Okay.
Great.
All right, I will call to order the February 21st Innovation Work Group. The first order of business is to approve the January 17th synopsis. Do we have a motion?
This is Kimberly. Oh, I'll make a motion to accept them as presented.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. And moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Done. Okay. Next order of business. I'm not seeing the agenda anymore.
Next next up, I think we have Glenn with a brief legislative update. There is no attachment for this agenda item, so we'll just have Glenn take it away. And hey, Glenn, I can see you there, but it looks like you're on mute. I'm not sure if you're talking yet.
Sorry. Yeah, this is Glenn. And I just wanted to give folks just a brief synopsis on where we are at in our current, in regards to the legislative session. Just wanted to quickly go over just some top bills that we've been following that have really a direct impact on PEB and OEB, and then kind of go over some of the other areas that we're also seeing some bills on. One of our first ones is, many of you know, the Dexter pilot. This is a global budget pilot. This bill, and I don't want to go into all the details, establishes a multi-payer regional global budget pilot. PEB and OEB would be involved in this, as well as they would like some commercial payers. This bill is effective January 1st, 2024, but won't launch until 2028. Some of you have been at some of the meetings with Representative Dexter. It is in the the House Healthcare Committee, but no hearings are scheduled at this time. Ali, Margaret, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, they're asking for feedback from board members, and I think, looking at some kind of implementation or operational challenges as part of their proposal. But beyond that, I think we're just continuing to be as responsive as possible and remaining neutral on the bill. That's really about it.
I think, let me add that they have asked both boards if they could be put on the agenda for a presentation, and that request has been denied on the OEB side, I presume on PEB as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen the request for PEB yet, but that's correct on the OEB side.
Okay. That would be, there's no precedent for that happening, so.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
It fits all former actions.
Yep.
The next one is a Senate Bill 403. It's actually a bill that would allow retired police officers from Oregon State Police to participate in PEB benefits as they would be as active employees. I mean, right now, when you retire from the state and participate in the PEB retiree plans, you pay 100%. So this would basically be, they would be paying 1 to 5% like a normal employee. This had a public hearing and had a work session. Its cost impact was around 13 million for the first biennium and 18 million for the next. So it's actually been referred to Ways and Means. There are a number of other issues that kind of go along with that, about, that it only would apply to Oregon State Police officers, and, kind of it's not really equitable. It doesn't apply to really across the board in many cases. The other thing is in regards to its cost impact there. House Bill 3140, this would actually be a bill to remove the 3-year RFP requirement on our consulting contracts. This, of course, has a lot of positive benefits. It would allow our contracting staff and even regular staff, as well as our board members, to focus on other projects, and also really allow us to conduct other RFPs in its place. That's at the House Healthcare Committee, and it currently hasn't been scheduled for a hearing. Those are really, we would say, is kind of the top, we call them priority one bills at this time. The other ones that, we also are following about 35 bills that would either have a cost impact on PEB and OEB, or we can do without a cost impact, but also ones that we're just kind of following at this time. One that may seem familiar to folks is the infertility benefits that would require PEB and OEB to offer all levels of infertility benefits and without any cost sharing, really. So it would make that we'd have to get rid of the benefit maximum cap that we have on infertility benefits. That hasn't really been scheduled for a hearing yet. We also have a number of bills in regards to prescription drugs that are out there. One of them that just landed was a bill that would allow the Prescription Drug Affordability Board to set upper payment limits on the costs that a number of entities would pay for specific drugs, including PEB and OEB. There's really, it just would allow them the capability to do it, and there's not a lot of detail on when they would get this done, how this would be done. It's just really giving them the authority. That's actually scheduled for this Wednesday. There's also a number of ones that would put limitations on pharmacy benefit managers, which are employed both OEB and really PEB through their health insurers use pharmacy benefit managers. We have one that would put some modifications on how the Senate Bill 551, and for those who don't know, that's the part-time faculty program that we're currently running. Then we have a number of what I'd say health equity bills, such as gender affirming care, healthcare interpreters, a number of bills to strengthen behavioral health, and a number of bills in regards to reproductive benefits. Actually, one that is just being launched, or I'm sorry, introduced, would combine a number of different areas and also really sets down reproductive health benefits as rights here in Oregon. So that is coming out of the Speaker's office, and there's a whole team working on that right now. One that you may
So
know
I had a
of.
question, Glenn.
Sure.
The infertility benefit bill, what does it obviously would I think we saw costs increasing in the anywhere from 1% to 3%. I think I'm making those numbers up, but if it was in that range, obviously it challenges both OEB and PEB in regards to the 3.4. Is there any comment about the 3.4% in that bill? And if not, should OEB and PEB, or through OHA, be sending a note to that rider, the legislator who's introduced that, to include some remedy?
Well, when we do the bill analysis, which goes to our government relations here, we always include for any bill that has a cost to it that this really challenges our capability to meet the 3.4%. And then when we do the fiscal impact statement, where we, for something like that, that bill, like last year it was 1.3 on the OEB side and 0.6 on the PEB side, that we would, of course, put the cost, how we came about it, and then we always put in there about, again, it challenges our capability to meet the 3.4%. So we, in every way that we can in regards to communicating, either through our government relations or who then, will speak to the different legislators or through the fiscal impact statement. Yeah, we do remind them about that.
Okay. I mean, it would seem that that a bill that would do something like that, if it wanted support, it would do things that would allow entities like OEB and PEB be in favor of it. But if it doesn't include some remedy, then it's hard to imagine being in favor of it, because it means you're taking away somewhere else. So that's all I'm trying to say. I'll shut up.
No, it's a very good point, and like I said, we really try and stress that point, that it challenges our capability to meet the 3.4%. And and that's why, of course, in the fiscal impact statement, we say, well, this is how much in limitation we're going to need, added limitation, to give them even a dollar and cents idea about how much it's costing us in regards to that. So no, I totally understand, and we try and stress that as really as much as possible that we can. I guess what I'm trying to, yeah, I mean, we do stress that.
No, I
We do stress that
appreciate
as a
what you're
point.
saying. That's fine. I don't need to. I'm not trying to have us talk much more about this, but I just wanted to see whether or not there's any acknowledgement in the bills themselves that, and it doesn't sound like there is. It's all for us to be able to say, hey, this, if you do this, great idea, but it kills us, from a financial standpoint. I got it. So I'm sorry. We for sure move on.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's a very valid point, and I wasn't trying to kind of belabor it. I just wanted to make sure that, yeah, that this is something we do stress. One of the other things that's happening too is, I'm sure you might have seen it in the paper. There is a bill to create a governing board for a universal health plan here in Oregon, and they're coming up and they're being tasked with the bill, excuse me, creates the board and then tasks them with coming up with a plan to implement universal health plan here in Oregon by 2027. There's not really a lot of detail in regards to what exactly the plan would be, and they would have to provide the plan to the legislature by 2025, along with what the costs would be. So we're pretty much just following that bill in regards to that. And I believe their hearing is on Wednesday too. So they've had a public hearing and then they have a work session on that. So it'll be interesting to see whether they just forward this to, say, Ways and Means, or it doesn't move any further on that. But a lot of it we wouldn't know until the actual plan came about. And then there's just a number of other various benefit bills, such as hearing aid coverage. There's one on sickle cell disease, a number of others that you will see pretty much every session. The thing that's kind of just an overview, and just to keep in mind, there is no limitation on the amount of bills that legislators can introduce this year for this session, which is why we've had a lot of bills this year. I mean, they said in the beginning about 2,000 bills overall in the session were introduced. So I think the committees are really trying to work through those before the deadline, which is in April. Are there any questions?
Doesn't look like it. Thanks, Glenn. I don't see
Thank
any
you.
hands. Hey, Margaret.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. moving on to our next agenda topic. This is a carryover we touched on at the January meeting. And specifically, the work group's charter notes that in the first quarter of each calendar year, the work group will select or affirm a chair and vice chair for the year. We touched on this at the January meeting and decided to carry it over to this meeting's agenda. One consideration that was out there was that we are currently recruiting for an additional PEB board member to serve on the work group. That is underway. The request is out there to the PEB board. We have yet to identify another PEB member to participate. But that said, today, we have all 5 of the current work group members present. You do not have to make any changes to your current chair and vice chair, but this is just sort of a housekeeping thing that we want to make sure we cover in accordance with the charter. So as you all know, Jeff Brown has in a very dedicated manner been serving as your chair, and Sean Parkman has been your very dedicated vice chair. So this is just your opportunity to affirm, or, if anyone wants to step down or otherwise propose changes to that arrangement, now would, is your opportunity to have that discussion.
Well, I haven't had any discussions with anyone, and in that vein, I move that we maintain status quo.
I agree.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. And I think, again, this group sort of operates by consensus, so you don't really have to take a formal vote, but if there's general agreement, we can consider this settled for the calendar year.
Here, here.
Any other comments, Jeff and Sean? Are you okay with that?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
Great.
sounds good.
All right.
If you're interested, Kimberly, let me know. Okay.
I've got my plate full. I'm doing a large conference in Portland in October, and my life is going to be nuts here in a few months. So
yeah, I seem to recall that you had a few things going on, but yeah, fair enough.
And then, they decide to just leave prison whenever they want. So today's been kind of fun.
There's that.
Busy times. Well, thank you, everyone. I mean, I do know, just speaking on behalf of staff, I mean, we absolutely appreciate the engagement and dedication that all the work group members bring, and look forward to carrying that on for the remainder, through the rest of the year.
Okay. Well, thank you, Margaret.
Yeah, thank you.
So our consultants are up next with an update on the project plan for our COE project.
Thank you, Chair.
Who's giving this?
It's going to be Emery, although there may be commentary from the rest of the Mercer consultants. But thank you. Actually, let's move to the next slide. So in this presentation, what we're going to do is actually just give a little history on where we have been, where we were since, I think, essentially the November IWG meeting, and like some of the discussions have been taking place, and then talk about where we are planning to go over the next few months to a year plus. So next steps. And, we welcome discussion at any point during this presentation, especially, I think talking about some of maybe the projected timelines or steps, or, some of the discussions that have been taking place, and what might be done to help push this project forward. We would definitely welcome people stepping in. So moving on to the next slide. Actually, I think one more, please. Thank you. So this kind of just does a whole quick history of the COE. So just there on the left, the initial identification, the work that was done to kind of identify, musculoskeletal as a top condition, that there's 1,500 knee, hip, and back spine procedures that were done over essentially a 12-month time period. And that, there are issues, potential issues where complications and readmissions do occur. And that there might be an opportunity to improve on those complication rates to bring it back down to the best in class rates of less than 1% compared to the 3 to 5% that was happening for OEB and PEP. And so to help mitigate that issue, the IWG did develop an initiative to develop a COE strategy that was Oregon focused, create metrics that would be included for all plans. And the initial target was the 22 to 23 plan year for OEB and the 23 plan year for PEP. So the initial goals were to identify high quality facilities and providers to improve the outcomes, and also to identify members early and potentially promote the less invasive surgeries, more conservative therapies to avoid surgeries whenever possible and save money that way. Also, increase the consistency in reimbursement, include bundle payments and warranties in this case. So that work took place following the consultant RFP. Work was transitioned to Mercer in April of last year, and what we were focusing on was knee and hip joints, and we did change the implementation date to about essentially like a year later. We obtained data from Clarify, ran the plans, ran some analysis on their own data as well as APAC, and provided it to us. And then in November, Mercer presented initial ranking of facilities, talked about the methodology that we used, which included Clarify and APAC data, and essentially showed it to the IWG board. Are there any comments or questions about the history of the COE? Any other recollections that maybe the IWG members want to bring up? It's important. Nope. Okay.
Let's keep moving.
Yep. So next slide. So next couple slides kind of just show some of that information that's provided in November. So this was the initial tier rankings, and we talked about how potentially to stratify the tiers. So there was a tier 1 on the left where you had some of the higher performing, and then there's a little bit of a gap to the tier 2. And then you had the tier 3 where I think there was some general discussion as to how big that tier should be. I mean, there's about 6 that were identified previously, and then there could be like 8 or so additional that were a little bit lower performing. But there were some discussions about this. And then you can see down below that based on the information, some of the bigger hospitals were some of the lower performing, or those that had over 50 surgeries down at the bottom. And some of the smaller facilities had a little bit better performance on the left. And so that definitely led to some discussion. The next slide, please. Can we move ahead one slide, please?
So Emery, when you get the new data set, would appreciate it if you would bring this slide forward and compare it to a new one.
Yes. Yeah, we will definitely take a look at that to see, how much difference there is in the data. And the metrics may not exactly be the same. That's going to be part of the discussion points moving forward. But we will definitely take a look at that, as well as the scores, everything, I guess, in the project plan. So based on those tiers, we would essentially adapt or create a network that would be to ensure adequate coverage by region. So we show the different regions here. The rural areas actually kind of got split up a little bit as well, kind of talking about the coast compared to the southeast area. Those places do travel. And if we move to the next slide, actually. Next slide, please. So utilization by region. So this kind of shows where the members are, and that's across the top. And then the facilities that they had their surgeries in, which is top to bottom. So horizontal is where the members are located, and the facilities that they are located or that went to are top to bottom. So this takes a look at 3 years of data. And then if they stayed in the same region, that's where the boxes are. So for example, alphabetically central regions on the top row, as well as the far left. So 27 members stayed in the central area for their surgeries. And that's about 90% of their overall members. For the coast, 22 stayed in essentially a coastal facility, but that did involve, that's only 42%. So down at the bottom, 42% only stayed in the region. So that means about 58% did travel. And you can see Willamette Valley had the majority of that, of the people who traveled for their surgeries. The metro region, so that's Portland, 92 stayed in the area, and that's 87%. A few went down to the Willamette Valley, so that could have been Salem or further down to Eugene. So not too many travel there. They kind of just stay regional. The Northeast, a little bit more staying in the region, 26 or 59%, but you did have others that moved or went to other locations, which would be out of state. So 14 essentially would have gone to like Washington or maybe Idaho. And then you did have a couple that moved to central or the metro area. And Tom, you had the question.
Yeah, I'm surprised by the total number of surgeries over 3 years is only 500 for the combination of OEB and PEB. I thought we were talking about 1,500. So I'm surprised by the number of surgeries.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that 1,500. That was information that was taken from a prior IWG meeting, but
Okay.
I'll double check that one for you.
Okay.
Jeff?
So I would like to share this slide at the next OEB board meeting, but I would like it broken out for OEB members.
Okay.
So I don't know if PEB would like to have a version of this for PEB alone. But
Okay.
since this deals with travel, I think it's kind of important to get that out there.
Yeah, we can do that.
So can have that in the next 2 weeks? No,
So yeah, the early March board meeting. Yeah, sure.
2 weeks, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
So
can
for
we,
members of
can
the
we
Southeast,
just,
yes.
can we just resolve the 1,500 versus 500? Now I know that when the 1,500 that was mentioned earlier included spine, my guess still is that hip, knee are at least as frequent as spine. Each of them are as, so it should be, if it's 1,500, we should be seeing 1,000, not 500.
Yeah, I'll have to
Just
check. I mean, it
confirm it.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll confirm it. I mean, it was procedures, and I want to say maybe we localized, centralized a little bit more on this initial COE in terms of types of procedures to like replacements. I'll have to check on that.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah. So the southeast region, there's only 5 that had surgeries, and none of them stayed in the region. There's not really any facilities in the region. Southern was the other region that had some travel, so about 57% traveled. Most of them went to the Willamette Valley, so they did go further north in that case. And in the Willamette Valley, the majority of the surgeries, and basically all 94% of them stayed in that area. So there is definitely travel, but it's only for certain portions of Oregon, which I guess, isn't unexpected in this case. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. Next slide, please. So one other thing that we discussed in the November meeting was really the plan design. We introduced this plan design where we would tier 3 different facilities, and our initial proposal was to make the highest tier 1 quality be tier 1, and they would also agree to additional contracting terms, and then there would be travel, lodging, and the additional cost tier could be waived in that case. Then tier 2 would be high quality facilities that didn't agree to contracting, or other facilities that do agree to the contracting terms. And then tier 3 would be those who do not agree to contracting terms and are not the highest quality. And those would have a higher copay. There wouldn't be travel and lodging. The tier 2 facilities if not all facilities would have tier 1, but there might be people who don't have access to tier 2. I mean, for example, those in the southeast, and if they wanted to go to a closer tier 2 facility, they could potentially have travel. But that was our proposal. I think there was definitely some discussions around that, especially in light of the tiering list, and how I guess that tiering list was broken out. So there was definitely a lot of discussions in November and following in this case. Okay. Moving on. So where we are now. So following that meeting, next slide. After the meeting, and this is like in discussions, like in following meetings and internal meetings, the IWG indicated, we need to take a look at additional data before making a final decision. Concerns about the volume data, making sure it's more, I guess, reflective, as much as we can get based on the um, Oregon menu of certain like universe of services. So decided to get additional APAC data and use 4 years to create the metrics and the score the quality of the facilities. So that we sent in a data request, and we're working on obtaining the data for knee hip surgery. We are still in the process of figuring out who's going to be analyzing the data, whether it's going to be a third party or Mercer. And then also in that process, we're going to obtain the spinal surgery data as well. And so during the process of creating and running the knee and hip surgery, we'll also take a look for the spine surgery data, run that, and to essentially create a second COE in conjunction and concurrent with this initial COE. With this additional information that's needed, the COE is being pushed back another year. So it's targeted for October of 24 for the OEB, and then essentially January for 25 for PEP. Some additional information while we're continuing to develop the COE. We're going to talk about facility contract requirements and documentation and documenting it, identifying and getting approval, just making sure that everyone's getting on board with the metrics and scoring, as well as additional refinement development of the plan design. And one area where I think we've talked internally about trying to get more, I guess, intellectual rigor is to create documentation of the various elements of the COE. And this will be kind of shown in the project plan moving forward, as well as one of the following slide. So what we would do is create this documentation. It kind of be the source of truth on decisions. It'll memorialize the reasons for making those decisions. And some of the topics are shown there. Essentially, it's pretty much everything that goes into developing a COE. There's been many discussions about it. Lots of good free-flowing discussions, but we haven't been, I guess, writing down the process and capturing all of it and making sure everyone's on it, agrees with it. And if we develop this documentation, the socialization with the various boards, facilities, plans, everyone that, might be people of interest to, even the members as well, getting that information so that people can actually read and understand the whole process for why we're asking people to go to certain facilities or potentially travel to get their surgeries. And with that, I think I want to pause and see if there's any other comments about that I might have missed about feedback, your own personal feedback or stuff from the IWG or your board members, fellow board members, regarding development of the COE so far and potential concerns or paths forward, I guess.
Yeah, this is Tom. That last one in terms of documentation, I think will be critical in terms of the communication process. So I know that there's been huge amounts of conversation, and we've looked in lots of different avenues as the innovation work group, but to be able to document that thought process and how decisions are made or really critical, and I really encourage. I'm really pleased that you've raised that and that you're including that in the work plan.
Tom, it's James. We are thinking that, this is partly a fringe benefit of the new data pool that gives us some time to tighten things up. The other thing I think is very likely is that we would have sort of these decision logs and issue papers and options, so that as we go through this process in the abstract, we have maybe some choices that will be made when the metrics all come back. So we're thinking that, the number of tiers could be revisited. The details of the leading contender could be put in a continuum between the least disruptive to the most disruptive to the community, the members, the providers, etc. And then, we will try to preconceive also if there's any need for phasing in over time or that kind of a thing.
This is JJ. I was just thinking, I personally don't like that we're pushing the time frame out, but I am 100% in support of it because of the importance that we're right. We're going to be putting a plan that's going to limit access to facilities, and we need to make sure that we have the absolute most defensible data in our decision before we pull the trigger on that.
So in anticipation of the next 4 pages of the proposed implementation plan, a couple of comments. One is we get to the end and it's the finish date in the development is October of 24. That's too late. We need to be finished in order to send out communication during the summer of 24. So I'm going to ask that there be some tightening. Second question is, have you communicated with the carriers involved as to how much time they need or is needed to negotiate the parameters of the plan so that we have their input as we build an implementation plan? Because it may be, just using Providence, for example, since they are an integrated system, that they may not need as much time as is considered in the work plan. Kaiser as well. Need feedback from MODA. But if we don't have this done until October of 24, for OEB, we're talking 25. And I'm just screaming uncle here. This is too long. We need to really buckle down.
Jeff, we can go through the detailed project plan in just a sec. I don't think we're targeting October 24 really for the end date. I think we were targeting getting all the information basically all set up October of 23, getting it to the boards after that. And then, so basically all 24 would be implementation and communication.
It says phase 3, 10/30/24.
I think we need to walk through let's walk through it, and we'll keep that concern in the fore.
Yeah, we can definitely. Any other comments? Actually, let's move to the next slide, but just wondering if there's additional comments. So this next slide, I think we talked about some of these questions and concerns. It's just documenting it for the presentation. But I think we've talked about all these. So moving on to the next slide, please. One more. So talking about the project plan. So these are the major steps. The design would be that now through August of 23. And so those elements includes collecting data and creating those metrics, creating the contracting requirements for the facilities and plans, as well as the member plan design and refinement to travel benefit design and all the issues, taxation and other issues, administrative issues with that. What we are calling development, which would of the COE would essentially be starting in July, once we get the initial data and metrics. And that would go through the end of the year. So that would involve taking those metrics and creating the scoring and tiers, as well as socializing that and getting everybody comfortable with what the data is telling us. So I think James had talked about various options, so the phase in various options for the plan design or the tiers, to show you the potential ways of maybe mitigating member impacts and getting approval and getting the plans on board. Those things would happen in that time place, along with getting approval of the plan design and travel benefit designs. And a couple of hands are up. I think I saw Jeff at least first, but I'm not sure that was quite right.
Oh, let me get rid of it.
Oh, you didn't have a comment?
Here we go.
Tom, did you have a comment?
Yeah, what we need here is board approval needs to be explicit within one of these buckets. And apropos to Jeff's comment, it has to be, maybe it's its own highlighted, it's kind of formal approval. And my guess is that it has to be done by December 2023, may even be November 2023, but I understand design approval, but that needs to be explicit board approval and with a pretty hard date on that, to make sure that the implementation part does occur and gets woven into all of the contracting process and rate setting and all of those things, so that we do have an October 24 start.
Jeff, did you have a comment?
No, okay, it finally went off. I've been clicking and clicking.
Yeah, and then implementation would, yeah. Okay, so yes, Tom, I think let's go through the detail on that. I think I believe we are targeting what meaning that time frame that you're stating. But let's go through the next few slides. The next slide, please.
Emery, my only point is that that's under this section of development.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be, for concrete people like me, there needs to be a line that says approval.
Gotcha.
And that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we can. It's like, yeah, we can definitely add that. James, we talked a little bit about this. James, was there anything you wanted to add on the stakeholder engagement? Just trying to make sure everyone's getting on board.
Not really, other than it's a complex environment and it's an important process. And we have a lot of people to get having the same vocabulary, language, understanding, etc. So I think this is a slide simply acknowledging that given the new time frame, given that we are turning ahead to try to really implement, this is a key consideration, and it will be continuing to be worked pretty specifically.
Yeah, and this, if you take a look at the time frames that we have set, this February meeting right now, we're trying to get approval for this engagement or a project plan, and then March and April, May, we talking about getting the background, getting the assumptions, getting everything documented as continual development as we work on the data, and getting everything set up for the scoring and, I guess, final approval by the boards of the COE in this case. Okay, so next slide. So the design phase, we are showing the major steps in the purple. So phase one's design. We have the start and finish dates listed up there. These are our preliminary. We can talk about whether some of these are reasonable, if you want to move up some, move back some, which ones might need to take longer, but welcome your discussion. We've tried to put in as many a detailed number of concrete steps in this project plan. And we also have asterisks there on the left, which are kind of where we require a vendor partner to, or an outside partner to kind of provide information or steps that they need to take. So, for example, so the first section, 1.1, is the data. So we want to obtain the data and analyze the metrics. So the data request has been sent out. We want to finalize the data request. That's actually, I think, still in process. And then eventually we will receive the APAC data. And hopefully we're targeting before, I guess, essentially a month from now. So that does give APAC a little bit of time. And then, we could then start working on the APAC data. So the identifying the partner is taking place right now. So once we get the APAC data, then we would send it to the partner, or we do it internally, and then that work would be done to clean, analyze, and then create the metrics and we're targeting that by the end of June. So that process will be going on. It's a big part of the process, and there's going to be things that are needed being done in conjunction, such as the metrics and scoring. And so in this case, the metrics and scoring is not the calculation necessarily of that. It's really the selection of the metrics and the scoring methodology. So creating that initial list of metrics used to scoring in tiers, that's tied into the data partner as well. Depending on who we work with, the metrics that they have available will be developed. We will get that list as well as the types of metrics that we want. And I think one of the things that we heard was, basically, Clarify and the APAC data had different types of metrics, and they weren't necessarily identical. There's only a little bit overlap. So this is where some of the stakeholdering is going to come in, where, let's get that list of metrics. Let's get everyone on board with the metrics that we are using, as well as the percentages, the scoring methodology and the percentages for each of those metrics. That was definitely some of the feedback. And, once we get those set, the data is going to tell us what the data is going to tell us. And at that point, I think hopefully people will be more comfortable with what the data tells us, and then we'll be able to use that to move forward on the COE. So that process of selecting isn't just, one step. There's going to be a review, there's going to be revising of scoring methodology, there's going to be communication with the vendor partners, and then getting their feedback, and then revising and discussing the final scoring methodologies. And that we're targeting that by the May IWG meeting, and to get that approval at that time frame prior to when the metrics are finally calculated. So before I move on, I guess I wanted to pause and see if anyone had any comments about those two initial steps or timing. Okay. So next slide. Thank you. So a couple of other steps are going to be taken, projects taken in during this time frame. It's really the COE facility contracting requirements. So developing that list of contractual requirements, including the warranties, member assistance, performance guarantees, and then reviewing and revising those requirements, creating that list and then approving it. The time frame is very similar. We're creating that initial list, presenting it, maybe the initial list in the March IWG meeting, having feedback from the plans, and maybe potentially the facilities as well. You know, if the plans can communicate with some of the facilities, let us know what might be a little too onerous, or you know, where there's room to move. And then trying to approve those again in that May IWG meeting. The plan design, which is section 1.4 on the bottom, is actually a little bit of a longer process. So the plan design, you know, we can revisit the final plan design. We can talk about revisions, potential revisions, and maybe come up with different phase-in options or different options for this plan design. And kind of revisiting and reviewing this plan design is going to take a while. We don't anticipate it ending before we get the metric results. I mean, I think making sure people are comfortable with the plan design and the scoring methodology results, scoring results, and then the tiers and the facilities that are there, you know, talking with the interested parties, and then also determining the impact of the plan design on the metric results. That would be done in the July, August timeframe, communications, and then final approval of the plan design. In this case, it would be through the IWG board for September, October for communication to the OEB and PEB boards, which would then take place once the IWG does finally approve a plan design. Any questions or comments on these two sections? Okay. Next slide. So the travel benefit. This one's a little bit of a sticky wicket. You know, we evaluate this current travel and proposed for 24. I know in the PEP board, we kind of talked about this, and Sean brought up just the concern about whether, you know, a travel benefit in the PEP board being decided might have impacts on the COE for the travel benefit. And, you know, I think we want to talk through this, figure out, you know, the issues and whether they could be overcome, really. You know, it's like the amounts that are covered by the IRS are low and might not be good enough to mitigate the impacts on the members, you know, the concerns of that for the board members. And so what can be done? Can it, you know, can there be a, maybe, I don't know, what steps can be done to make sure that members who do have to travel are to get the high quality healthcare, you know, that it's not the requests upon them, the restrictions upon them aren't too onerous, and what can be done to help with the travel in this case. So the process, you know, is a little bit longer that we have laid out. Discussions would happen. We would revise it in May, potentially talk to the plans and other board, you know, maybe the boards in that summer timeframe. Potentially, and then with the IWG, we try to finalize it kind of when we get the initial list, getting comfortable with the initial list of scoring the tiered facilities as well as the plan design. So that's kind of targeting the July, August timeframe, maybe hopefully before, I don't know, hopefully before September, but you know, it could be maybe done like September with the final, or October with the final plan design option. But that's the plan. That's the hope. Any questions before we move on to phase 2? Okay. So that's kind of like the design. Actually, can we move back one slide, please? Thank you. So that's the design portion of it. The development portion, we're saying starts once we get the metrics. So in that purple phase 2, the start time is July, and we'd finish hopefully by the end of the year. So that initial list of facilities, we would develop it on the metrics and the proof methodology in July. We would communicate with staff and plans and start talking about it in that July, August timeframe. Finalization of the tiers, you know, discussion as well as the plan design would happen through September. And we would want to approve the tiers as well as the plan design in October. There are potential phase-in options that we were talking about. The timing would be along with the plan design as well as the final approval of the tiers, but we wanted to list as a possible step here. Next slide. So the COE design approval. So communication with the board and approval with the board. That would, right now we're targeting November. There's going to be communications that happen once the the IWG is getting very close or approves the list, plan, design, and everything. So we do have communications from October through the end of the year, at least developing the initial communications plan as well as communicating with the board members and the others. So, but we are targeting getting the board approval in the November meetings. And just wanted to leave that there before we move into the essentially implementation. So, Tom, yes.
Okay, and this is for Ollie. Is there a requirement for the boards for them to hear a proposal and then basically have a month to chew on it? So would it be presentation in November with approval in December?
Yeah, there's no requirement per se, but I mean, I think we can do what, the IWG would like to do.
It's been practice for the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, I think that'd be perfectly fine. Margaret, do you have any opinion?
No, I agree. I mean, I think as general practice, it's always good to take the board options. Perhaps one of those options has a strong recommendation behind it in terms of being the recommended or identified preferred option, and then allowing that little bit of time for deliberations and decision making, which, yeah, I mean, Tom certainly is right. That typically will potentially involve a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, so I think it sounds like, it's for OEB, it's that first week in November, we need to be ready with the project and to present it and to have the major conversation. But it for this to pass, because it is going to be complex enough. I think that we then probably should be looking at then final approval in the December meeting.
Yeah, and for something like this, we've had special, shorter board meetings, impromptu even in the past, if necessary, to get the job done, to meet the timeline. So, I think there's things that can be done if we're not quite on schedule.
And that December timeframe, at least for I mean, for PEB, it's going to be good enough. But in terms of OEB, is that sufficient time for, I guess, the renewal process?
For the which process?
For
Yeah,
the
which
renewal
one?
process for OEB, like getting approval in December rather than November. Yeah.
As long as that just doesn't keep pushing other things out further.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, if there's going to be a lot of discussions, and maybe there probably will be a lot of discussions, but if there needs to be additional processes, we are working, we can shift things up, or we can essentially go in maybe a month earlier with like some of the potential options and just kind of use the board. I don't know if it's a sounding board, but just to communicate those potential options, come back with the feedback and maybe do a more final version like a little bit earlier, potentially. I don't know. But we can discuss.
Yeah. I think it falls under the point that you're making, Emery, and I think probably what's underneath your concern is, will the plans have time to do 3.1, the facility contracting part? And the reality is, their MODA and Providence, and I guess to some degree KP, need to be talking now to their facility partners and saying, this train is on the track. And yes, indeed, it's going to require formal board approval, but these are things that we need to be starting to explore now for October 2024 start. So the conversation, it's not like, hopefully, again, our three medical carriers are thinking of this now, coming up with a plan, developing a team to talk to their facility partners to be able to, kind of fill it in as this, as the COE, all the components of it finally become, formal. So that's an encouragement to our partners, to our health plan partners, to be making sure that they've got this stuff, that they're going, moving.
Yes, and we have meetings scheduled with the plans. I think they were put on hold following that November. While we were kind of, I don't know, like revisiting, I guess, the whole entire process, and as part of that, stakeholder process, right? It's not just it's everybody. It's the plans, it's the facilities, creating that list of contractual and other requirements, to help, to save money. I mean, to really save money. It's not just the dollars and cents. It's not really just the bundle pricing. It's also, not just the warranties, but hopefully mitigating, like redirecting people to lower cost services, to if they don't need a surgery, making sure they don't get the surgery. That's where a lot of the savings comes in, and making sure the plans and the facilities have a process, to do that as for the COE, because yeah, but having those discussions, we'll have them, start them up again, take place, and document it, and try to get everyone on the same page and document it. And so hopefully this process will be smoother, I guess, for the November, December timeframe. But yes, so the contracting right here, we have, I mean, I guess this is the official contracting starting right after approval by the boards. So whether it's November or December, and then finishing, or we've targeted the finish date of March, end of March, but that may drag on a little bit, but hopefully not too much. And then we don't have the full steps. We have one line for the preparing for the COE implementation, or doing the implementation. That will be fleshed out as everything gets finalized, and then getting the program starting in October of 24. And so, these steps, will require our vendor partners help. And I guess this is official notice that this is where we're targeting, and to I guess put it on your calendars for that time. The section down below really talks about the I guess what we would call an annual refresh process. So the updated data we would get in January through March for APAC, and our current expectations to get additional year of information to update its metrics, to take a look at the facilities, to see that we still have the right facilities, that the facilities that we say are high performing continue to be the high performing, and to allow for some of the lower performers to maybe improve their performance and to move up a tier or two. And so we would recalculate the metrics. We would also get data from the plans on the specific facilities that are in the tiers, and for the performance guarantees, as well as the OEB and PEB members. And so each year we would try to get that information as we move on. And those, based on the information, we may calculate new tiers. We would revisit and just make sure that that list is good, and then through essentially do that in the performance guarantees through September. And so that way we can get any potential changes in place for OEB to really start the renewal, or to the OEB board to approve in October and November in this time, in this case. I think that's actually, I don't know, is that the last slide? That is actually the last slide. So I want to, yes, Margaret.
Thanks, Emery. Just to chime in, I think when we think about kind of the longevity of this program and sort of, we're very focused on initial design and implementation and launch. But when we think about program maintenance and evolution over time, I think it's going to be really important for us pretty soon in this process to identify sort of like some policies and some guiding principles around annual updates to data and the degree to which data swings or changes from year to year move facilities along the tiers. I mean, I think it would be from the member perspective, there would be concerns if a 1 year slight swing in data all of a sudden means that a facility is no longer part of the program or something like that. And so I think we just want to be really thoughtful and just develop some principles or some policies around how we annually maintain, reevaluate and maintain facilities in this program. We do want to try to maintain some degree of stability for members, but we also do want to stay current with the data and make sure that where facilities are tiered reflects their most recent or most up-to-date quality indicators. So I just think that'll be an important thing for us to be thoughtful about as we're developing all of this, so that we go into it with a really sound framework for how we're going to do that from year to year.
Thanks. Any other comments, questions, concerns?
Do you, would it be, you've laid out a work plan. Do you need formal approval by the IWG now to move forward? Or is just having us discussed it good enough?
I think I'll leave the actual formal approval to Margaret and Ali. I think, at least on the Mercer side, we wanted to make sure everyone's comfortable. The IWG members are comfortable with what we proposed and the steps and the timing. As it can change, it will change, but there are some things that we are working on or we are working on or needs to get done in the next couple months, and just want to make sure that the steps, we're not missing anything that might give you pause, really.
And I actually thinking more about that formal approval. What we need is a lot of people, the health plans, and the facilities moving forward in this. So it may actually be best to have the boards review this action plan as such and to affirm it. And that's a question again for IWG leadership and OEB-PEB leadership. But I just don't, I want everybody to be moving full speed ahead and not shining this on with the idea, well, we'll just delay it by not responding and things like that. And if the OEB-PEB base is moving forward in kind of a new innovative process, that should get people's attention.
Yeah, and I think gathering consensus here today is the most important next step. I don't know that any formal action is necessary, but I don't see any problem taking this to board leaderships and even reviewing with the boards as a plan of action moving forward. Does that sound okay, Margaret, to you?
Yeah, I do think, yeah, I mean, I think certainly sharing the project plan with the boards, I think the challenge will be keeping it detailed enough to be sufficiently informative, but also high level enough not to be too detailed. The boards have a lot going on right now, so maybe we can think about the best way to share a sort of summary version of this with them. We have shared with the boards or let them know that they are going to be hearing a more substantive update in the late spring timeframe after renewals wrap up, that we will be coming back to the boards with sort of a regrounding and sort of a more comprehensive update at that time. The thinking being that if we can give the boards a really thorough kind of re-education or reintroduction to everything that's going on in before summer, that when things really pick up and we start to need decisions from them in the fall, they will sort of be better, better prepared to do that. But I think certainly sharing, some form of this timeline, even, sooner rather than later is fine. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So I think, yeah. So I guess if there's, I don't know what if with the consensus, making sure. I don't know if we've heard from every single IWG member on whether they want us to move forward like this, but I you know we hear we hear we hear what you're saying, concerns and timing, and we will do our best to meet that and to provide the information that the boards need to in order to really move forward on the IWG. And yeah, if you have, if you have any comments, questions, let us know, or let staff know, and they'll get it to us, and we will adapt as needed. But I guess with that, I'll turn it back over to Margaret.
Thanks, Emery. Yeah, there was a lot of detail here. This, the Center of Excellence project is going to be a big portion of the Innovation Work Group's work plan. So we'll certainly be talking more next month and in the coming months about this as well. So this project plan will help guide that, but it will likely evolve in places as we progress. It looks like Sean has his hand up. Did you have a question, Sean?
I just had a quick comment. Well, I don't know if it's quick, but I have a comment. It occurred to me earlier today in our PEB meeting, where we were talking about AOEs. And it was pointed out that the plans themselves, like Kaiser and Moda, Providence, they all have AOEs now for various stuff. And so that it's kind of brought up, like, how did they do it? Because we've been trying to do it for like 2 years, and like clearly we're like what data are they using? I mean, they're not doing an AOE like we are, but like, what's the comparison, I guess? Are they saving money by doing that, or did they just select some of their own folks and this sort of thing, And I'm just kind of like wondering, like, I don't know, can we learn anything? Is there, like, how did they do it so fast, I guess, using their own data, and why can't we just sort of like transfer I don't know. So it just got me thinking. We don't have to really like get into it now, but I guess it's more of a like future rhetorical question of just sort of like, how did they do it? And like, I guess I'm assuming that they have data that they made this decision, and I'm hoping that they have unique contracts with them that saves money. But anyway, just kind of throwing that out there.
No, I think it's an interesting question, and certainly I think so like for PEB, at least for PEB in particular now, I think, the main areas where you really see like a COE type arrangement existing is really around transplants. And I don't know enough about this to speak intelligently, but my understanding is that generally speaking, when it comes to transplants, there's a pretty limited pool of facilities that do those types of procedures. And so there's criteria and considerations that come into account in terms of identifying those. And I see Tom's hand up. One other thought I wanted to note. Also, I think bariatric is another area where we have some COE arrangements in place. So we could certainly revisit with carriers kind of their criteria for how they identify.
Yeah, I got the feeling it was broader than that. Like, so they, just in the comments, Moda has one for specific orphan drugs. They've got it. Let's see, what else did they mention? They said
Was there something about joints?
Yeah, there was a joint one. Let's see, diabetes, transplants, bariatric.
Yeah.
Providence had one, and then, as you say, transplants. So, like, clearly they've got something. I don't know. It's just brought up a question.
Yeah, and Sean, I'm kind of going back into my old life. It actually wasn't. It was never fast, and it is always. It's a complex decision making. But the issue, the ones that you've talked about, the orphan drugs and the and transplants are examples where the services just aren't readily available everywhere. So you then have to choose amongst a limited number of places where you're going to be doing these, exotic, you're not tertiary care, quaternary care. So that's where the vast majority of these things are. And what we're doing, which is different, is taking common stuff, but still common stuff that has complexity, and applying quality metrics around it to see whether or not there's better places to direct people. The bariatric part only came about because it was not a covered benefit. Transplants, again, not all, it's just not widely available. These esoteric gene therapy, treatments that are 2 million a pop, the cost of it is so prohibitive. You have to, if you're going to do it, you at least have to do it right, so you don't have to do the $2 million treatment a second time. But we're doing something different here, in that we're talking about relatively common stuff, and that's available kind of throughout the communities, and trying to give direction to it. And I don't think the organized systems of care, a Kaiser Permanente is going to do that again within their own hospitals, but they have people having treatment in Salem, and I assume they have people having treatment in Eugene, and I know they have people having treatment up in Southwest Washington. So it still is a complex issue, and what we're doing is it's 2 years into, but I'm not surprised at all the amount of time it's taken. Looking at it again from my previous time as operations and medical director and things like that.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so looking at our meeting agenda, we're running just about 5 or 6 minutes ahead of schedule. We are scheduled for a 10-minute break. So Jeff, would you like to go ahead and take that? We have one more agenda topic, provided there are no more questions on the COE plan.
I think a break would be timely.
Great. So it's 2:54. Let's regroup at 3:05. We'll take an 11-minute break today. Thanks.
So how many people do we have back here?
I am checking. It looks like we have got all of our work group members back. Just so you know, Kimberly did leave a note that she had to get in her car, so she was going to be rejoining by phone. So we won't see her on camera, but she is here.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next report then.
So we have one more formal agenda topic for today's meeting. And specifically, this one is a review of a couple of performance guarantees that we currently have in our medical carrier contracts. I should note specifically one guarantee we currently have in contracts, the financial trend guarantee, which we've had for a couple of years now, and then also a newly proposed value-based payments guarantee, which we have put on the table to carriers this renewal. Just to kind of set this up, I'm going to actually I'll do my last slide first and just note that what we're really looking for today in this discussion is work group discussion and comments and input. I'm going to walk through the specific guarantees currently in the contract, what's proposed for the upcoming renewals, what has been proposed by PEB and OEB, and then just a summary of comments that we received from carriers related to those proposed guarantees. And so specifically today, we want to have some discussion and work group comments and feedback on the information. And in terms of the overall timeline, we are really looking to finalize all performance guarantees in the late spring timeframe, April to May, when we wrap up renewals. We want to have these performance guarantees wrapped up as well. So that's the overview. Rose, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. So just to give some background, and this will sound familiar to this work group, when we developed these performance guarantees several years back, the innovation work group played a large role in formulating the guarantees and pulling everything together. But currently, both PEB and OEB medical plan contracts have 15% of health plan total administrative fees at risk. And those fees at risk are spread across 5 categories, with 5% each on administrative performance metrics, clinical performance metrics, and financial trend. As I mentioned, for the upcoming renewal, which will be the OEB plan year that starts in October of 23 and the PEB plan year that starts January of 24, we've proposed an additional performance guarantee for value-based payment levels. And that also we've proposed as a 5% of administrative fees guarantee tied to carriers achieving value-based payment levels in line with the targets established in the Oregon VBP Compact. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to review the status and would like some discussion on, the work group's perspective on what we've presented. I do want to note that with regard to the clinical performance guarantee, that specifically CIAO will be taking a look at any updates and carrier comments related to that guarantee for the next contract year. They'll be discussing that at the March 7th CIAO meeting. Next slide, please. So on the financial trend guarantee, currently, this particular guarantee requires that total cost of care per member increases at 3.4% or less annually. So if the plan's cost increase 3.4% or less, there's no penalty. If costs increase more than 3.4%, but less than or equal to 4.0%, the penalty is 2.5% of administrative fees. And the full penalty of 5% of administrative fees applies if the annual increase is greater than 4.0%. Next slide. Some other things to note about the financial trend guarantee, the costs are based on all members, so it's active, retirees, COBRA, anyone enrolled in the plan. No adjustments are made for new drugs, specialty medications, or new medical procedures. However, the claims base is adjusted for any new or eliminated benefit changes that are incorporated. And there is also a large claims adjustment so that claims in excess of 500,000, I apologize, there's a zero missing there, I didn't notice, but it should be $500,000 at the individual member level are excluded. And then risk adjustment is incorporated to offset changes in risk profile, specifically due to members joining or leaving the plan. So essentially changes in risk to account for any sort of churn or change in enrollment. Next slide.
So,
Yeah.
Margaret, in that,
Yes.
if the fertility benefit
Mhm.
passed, that what you're having listed here would take at least that part into account.
Yes. Yeah.
Got
So
it. Thank you.
any like newly mandated or benefit changes the board makes are
but
yeah,
it doesn't
taken into account.
But it doesn't solve our problem with the state, which requires the total to be at 3.4%.
Yes.
It means
No,
that
that
we're
doesn't.
not charged. Yeah, it
So
doesn't solve the big problem. It solves the little one.
yeah, so the guarantee we've designed it to take into account, you know, if the mix of covered services changes year to year, we take that into account when we make that adjustment to calculate the actual cost increase.
Thank you.
But yeah, but you're correct that for the 3.4% cap, I mean, unless say a mandated benefit were to specifically indicate that there were some kind of, you know, and that would have to be done through the legislature, right? Because that cap is in statute. It doesn't, you know, that you're right, that would still fall within PEB and OEB's 3.4% statutory cap. In terms of carrier comments on the trend guarantee, in the renewal for this year, this first round renewal, we included this particular financial trend guarantee as status quo, so no changes to the guarantee for the next plan year, and offered carriers the opportunity to share any comments or information they wanted to in response to that. And so I'm going to walk through just sort of a summary of some of the comments that carriers shared. I do know that we do have, you know, our carrier partners in attendance at this meeting. And so as we get into discussion, just want to know that if carriers have additional information or thoughts that they want to share, they can certainly, you know, feel free to raise their hand as well. So just to note, in terms of the comments we heard, we did hear some concerns that the trend rate guarantee, oh, sorry, could you go back one slide, Rose? We should be on slide 5. Yeah, thank you. We heard concerns that the trend rate doesn't guarantee the or doesn't enhance the commitment already in place to helping achieve sustainable costs, and that it instead adds cost to the system in the form of a penalty for trend increases that are at times beyond carrier control. We heard some comments noting that a revised guarantee for fully insured plans tied to annual premium rate increase rather than cost trend may better align with the intent of the PEB and OEB statutory cap. Also comments that the current guarantee measuring annual cost trend could result in a situation where a fully insured plan would end up paying a penalty in years, even where the premium increases were under 3.4%. Next slide. We also heard some comments related to considerations of potential allowances, and this I think gets at some of the conversations that have gone on at the cost growth target committee meetings, but specifically suggestion that the PEB and OEB guarantee should permit allowances for factors that may cause cost growth in excess of the annual cap, particularly in alignment with potential allowances identified by the Cost Growth Target Program Implementation Committee and currently under further review of the Cost Growth Target Program Advisory Committee. The types of costs that those groups are looking at under the Cost Growth Target Program include things like changes in mandated benefits, new pharmaceuticals or treatments, changes in taxes or other administrative factors, acts of God, you know, natural disasters, pandemics, changes in federal or state law, investments to improve population health, and macroeconomic factors, which would include things like labor market trends and such. I do want to note there's a couple of asterisks there that currently the PEB-OEB trend guarantee does include some adjustments that would address some of these concerns, and that the guarantee, the way the cost trend is calculated, is it does exclude taxes. So next slide. An additional comment on the trend guarantee we received was that the PEB and OEB medical contracts should incorporate some additional steps in the annual review, annual guarantee evaluation and review process to allow carriers to review and comment on the analysis and discuss with OEB and PEB the factors driving costs and the reasonableness of results. I do want to note, I think when I look at the contract language, I think there are some things we can do here to find a compromise. We have some language in the contract that includes timeframes for review and carrier comment. I think we can take a look at that and perhaps make some revisions that would address some of these concerns. I do want to note, however, that I think we want to be very mindful when we talk about sort of reasonableness of results. We would want to be very specific in contract on any sort of definition of reasonableness. I think we want to, make sure that we're very clear in contracting in using terms such as that. Next slide. So that sums up the kind of the overall comments we received on the trend rate guarantee. And I suppose I should pause and find out, if the work group would like to have some discussion or comments one by one, or I can walk through. I've got several slides on the proposed value-based payment guarantee, finish those and talk about both guarantees at the same time. It's really your preference either way.
I think they're significantly different. One is something that we've done in the past, and the other one is proposed. So we should probably wrap up the cost trend.
Okay. So I guess I'll pause here, and we can go back over any of the specifics or any of the comments received. Does the work group have any initial reaction or comments? Again, the trend guarantee is something we've had in contract. This year is our second year. Last year was the first year the guarantee was in place, and our reconciliation process doesn't happen until about 9 months after the plan year ends. So we won't really do the sort of reconciliation and settlement on the first year guarantee until Q3 of this year. But we do have the same guarantee in place as well for the plan year that we're currently in. So it's been our standing guarantee for a couple of years. As I mentioned, we proposed in the renewal a status quo continuation of that, and invite any further discussion or questions about the carrier comments.
Is Glenn still on?
It looks like he is. Glenn, are you there?
I'm here.
Well, oh, you are. Okay, great.
Sorry.
Are you aware of any bills currently being considered that would provide exceptions for some of the things listed by the carriers as far as what PEB has to meet the 3.4%, except for insert the list, unless there's like an act of God or it was just really hard or whatever. Anything like that in the legislature at this point being considered as far as bills?
There's not anything for PEB and OEB. There are, I think, 1 or 2 bills for the cost growth target program. Employers who go through that. but nothing for PEB and OEB, no.
And just a
Couple
reminder,
of
the
them right
cost
today.
growth curve, that does not apply to PEB. Like we don't have those
No.
rules. Is that right?
No, those don't apply to PEB and OEB. Our 3.4% limit is written right into our legislation.
Yeah, so it's in statute that we have no
Yes.
exceptions.
Yeah, we have no exceptions, but the cost growth target program, which is in statute, applies to pretty much everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we've said on record many times, we would love to be part of that, but we're not. We have a legislation that forces us to meet 3.4% no matter what. No exceptions. And
Yeah,
so
it doesn't give exceptions for any type of service, or doesn't it give exceptions, say, for things that came about due to legislation?
right. So if that were to happen, where our legislation were changed to where we had more flexibility about that, then I would be more open to discuss exceptions, but we don't. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it. We have to meet those targets without exception.
Great. And it looks like Jennifer Stacy from Kaiser has her hand up. Jennifer, did you want to share some thoughts with the work group? It looks like you're talking, but I think your microphone is still on mute.
All right, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to first acknowledge that we are very much aware of the constraints that are put on OEB and PEB's growth of expenditures, and completely committed to doing everything we can to help meet that target of 3.4%. And I think we have a long history of doing so. The last 5 renewal cycles for OEB, we've averaged under 2%. The last 5 for PEB have been just over about 2.44. So there's, no change in commitment or support in that regard. The concern that we have, and we had submitted it when this first was brought up for the 2021-2022 cycle for OEB, and the 2022 cycle for PEB. We submitted it again last year, and would like to submit again this year, that we feel that this guarantee does not enhance our ability to support OEB and PEB in this requirement. Instead, it simply adds cost to the system, which pulls us further away from the ability to help meet that commitment. And, particularly at a time like this, where we are working through some unprecedented challenges that then challenge OEB and PEB in the cost growth piece. I would reiterate the same thing that we've said the past couple of years, and that Margaret mentioned, is that as a fully insured budget-based health plan, we consider multiple factors in developing rates for OEB and PEB. And so measuring a single factor across the differing health systems and different ways of preparing rates does not equally assess the impact of the change. And so, as Margaret mentioned, an example of this is in 2019 for OEB, our claims experience increased by 8.72%. Our renewal increase was 2.92. Or in 2020, it increased by 3.64. Our renewal increase was 2.1. So we would advocate that there not be this penalty at all. But certainly, if there is going to be a penalty, we would ask that it be looked at to be equitable in result, not equal in wording, because there's very significant differences in the way that the rates are prepared.
So thanks for that. I appreciate those comments. Margaret, can you help me understand the way we've got this designed at this point? So like, let's say that in this situation that the actual experience, the costs go up, in this case, 8%. But when it comes to us on the renewal side, it only goes up 2%. Would that trigger, that would trigger a penalty?
You know, there's and this I think gets at some of the difference between fully funded versus self-funded arrangements. And if it's okay, Emery, if you're still on the line, I'm hoping to punt this question to the actuarial brain behind the calculation. I don't know, Emery, if you can share some thoughts on that.
Is that in regards to the current or the proposed?
To the current, what we currently have in terms
Yeah, so
of,
there really isn't
yeah.
any difference in the calculation of the trend guarantee between fully insured and self-insured. We are including, we are looking at it on the claims, with incurred claims with 6 months to run out, and taking a look at the difference in the per member per month, um, between the prior and the current time period. So, so that is the same, in this case. Yeah. I mean, there's additional details, but I think they're crucial to this point.
Does that help answer your question, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of see the point. I mean, I don't know. Let's talk about it, I guess. At some point. Like if what we're concerned with is like the purpose of the thing is to have some kind of mechanism to sort of enforce the 3.4%, right? And if like at the end of the day that's done, then it's done. So it's like, what's the best way to measure, I guess, in order to get that result? So maybe we just put a pin in that to discuss. But like, is there a difference in effect from a fully insured point of view to a self-insured? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Sure, we can flag that.
Because I think that the point is that when we get to renewals, there is a number on the board, and it's either 3.4% or less, or it isn't. I mean, that's the effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And yeah, and this is Tom. The issue around, just as Sean is saying, for if it's self-insured, the claims are what the entity, PEB, in this situation for its self-insured business, is required to pay. For fully insured programs, you're not required to pay what claims are. You're required to pay what the premium is. So the idea of having a self-insured versus fully insured really are different, and the goal for a fully insured program should be, what's the percent of premium, it would seem, as compared to a self-insured, where again the funding entity is the one responsible for that. So it doesn't make, in the situation that Jennifer raised, if it's if what OEB pays is the 2% or PEB pays is the 2.4%, what the claim stuff in a way is meaningless to us. I mean, it is in a way, because if it's 20%, we know that there's a huge axe that's over our head. But at least for that year, we kind of got through it.
Yeah, I mean, right. And I might be missing something. So I mean, I'm just kind of like, I know, Ali, I know we have to endure 2 different tests for the 3.4%. And I always forget what the 2 different versions are because it's a little bit of nonsense to me. But I don't know if one of those gets us on the wrong side of one of those tests, is the point. Yeah, because it wasn't enough that they tested us once, it's twice. So yeah, do you have any thought on that? I guess on this little this particular thing that we're wrapped around at this moment, which is the difference between fully insured versus self-insured, around like what test is appropriate for performance guarantees around this?
Well, the 2 tests are, the first one is really the premiums cannot grow more than, or increase more than 3.4% annually. And so the boards have control over that. They set the premiums. The second one, I think, was kind of formulated because of the threat that the boards could buy down premiums to reach 3.4%, which is within their statutory authority, which is why they have a stabilization fund. It's the very definition of stabilizing rates. So that one is actually on actual costs and is 3.4% as well, and essentially is measured after a plan year is completed, basically by taking the earned enrollment months divided by the total costs. And that one's a little trickier because in a self-insured environment, the board would have less control over that. Claims are variable, and so there is a little slight difference there, but there's administrative fees as well that fall under that test. So yeah, I have to think about that one a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, and we can let it go and just talk about it later. But Ollie, you see, or the point Tom and I were, it's like at the end of the day, if what we have to pay is under 3.4%, like whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's what we had to pay.
Right.
When related to a fully insured thing, it's different when it's self-insured because, I don't need to explain, but
Yeah.
so it's just sort of like, I think at the end of the day, I think that's what we're after, is like, what did we have to our budget that we get tested on for the legislature either exceeded 3.4% or it didn't, and that's that. And we get punished if we did, and we don't if we don't. And it's just sort of, that's that. So anyway, I'm just trying to think through how to accurately align those things.
I will say I just struggle with the statement that a performance guarantee adds to cost. I have a hard time just conceptualizing that statement as a rule. I don't buy it.
Okay, well, it sounds like we have some further analysis and maybe conversation to have around the fully insured versus self-insured question. Are there any other thoughts that work group members have related to this particular guarantee? I think, as I noted, our plan is to continue to work to get these finalized by the time we wrap renewals. And so any comments or thoughts the work group offers, we'll certainly incorporate into that process as we work through these. Okay. Well, nothing further for now on the trend guarantee. We'll move on then to the proposed value-based payments guarantee. And as I mentioned, this is a new one that we have proposed for the upcoming contracts. It would be in addition to the existing guarantees, and it would require carriers to place 5% of administrative fees at risk for reaching the VBP targets, specifically the targets established for 2024 in the Oregon Value-Based Payment Compact. And those targets do require that 70% of all carrier payments to providers be under advanced VBP models of LAN 3A or higher, and that 70% of payments to primary care and general acute care hospitals be under models, value-based payment models of LAN 3B or higher, those 3B or higher being the shared risk or global payment arrangements. Next slide, please. In response to this proposed guarantee, we do have some summarized comments from carriers, specifically a suggestion that the measurement of VBP levels for this guarantee should be based on combined PEB and OEB payments to providers, that allowances should be made for hospital targets, and that has to relate to concerns that additional time is needed to negotiate downside risk sharing arrangements with hospitals, specifically arrangements that would remain within the parameters of hospital payments under 1067. And then also a suggestion that there be perhaps separate targets for primary care and hospitals. And one proposal that was put out or suggested was that proposed targets for primary care would be at 70% and hospitals at a max of 20% to avoid any penalty. Next slide. On this guarantee, we also received several proposals related to how to have a tiered guarantee structure. One of those was to split the fees at risk across primary care and hospitals so that 3.5% of the admin fees would be at risk for primary care hitting the targets and 1.5% would be at risk for hospitals achieving the targets. And then an alternative to that was a proposal for fees at risk to be split across LAN categories so that half of the fees at risk would be for payments at LAN 3A or higher, and then the other half at risk for payments being at LAN 3B or higher, with some further thresholds specified under that second bullet point of the LAN 3B, whereas there'd be thresholds of 40%, 55%, and 70%. And a third of the fees at risk amount, a third of that 2.5% would be at risk for each level, for meeting each level. One thing I do want to note about or a recommendation we would have related to a VBP guarantee would be that any guarantee that's structured in the contract would not necessarily specify the actual percentage thresholds, but rather would just refer to thresholds as indicated in the Oregon Value-Based Payment Compact. That would specifically be just so that our contracts remain in alignment with the compact, should it in any way evolve or change over time. We would have contract language that would basically align with what the compact said and not state sort of hard numbers for those thresholds in terms of the 70% level that's currently indicated for 2024. Next slide. To note, with regard to the performance guarantee levels, there was a proposal from carriers to reduce the guarantee levels from 5% to 4% of administrative fees for each category, which would mean in total, if we included the VBP category to the existing three, that would be 16% of administrative fees at risk next contract year, as opposed to the proposed level of 20% of administrative fees at risk in 2024. Mercer did take a look and do a sort of a review of the industry and identified sort of the minimum acceptable range of fees at risk in the 15 to 20% range, with greater than 20% being identified by them as a best practice. And so given that, the recommendation is to retain the fees at risk at the 5% category, or the 5% level, 5% of admin fee level for each of the 4 categories. Next slide. On the next slide, I think we just have a little bit of data. Again, these are some numbers that Mercer pulled together, just looking at projected total annual admin fees for each of the carriers, and noting the portion of that that's PEB versus OEB in each case. And then showing sort of what 5% of projected annual admin fees looks like. That would be the proposed amount at risk for each performance guarantee category. And then if you take into account all 4 of the categories, what 20% of projected annual admin fees would look like. Summarized, for each individual carrier, and then for PEB and OEB total, we'd be looking at, when you add up all of PEB and OEB contracts, about 21 million at risk for the year if we went with a 5% level on each of those 4 categories. Next slide. Oh. And this just kind of summarizes our next steps. Tom, did you want to go ahead with some thoughts?
Yeah, if it's, I want you to finish up, and then I'll give you a little bit of opinion.
Yeah, no, great. I think I'm set. I
Okay.
opened with the last slide already, so this just kind of summarizes what we're here to talk about. So go for it.
Okay. I'm on the value-based purchasing compact work group, and it is my feeling that this edition is not ready for prime time for several reasons. Number one, we are there's furious work happening now to nail down the primary care component of value-based purchasing for a model. There is development around so-called toolkits that practices would be able to use to do this work. And primary care is the farthest along in this process, and primary care is about 12% of the total healthcare budget. The Hospital Association has come to us and said, we are in such crisis, where they had talked about starting to work on a hospital model. They're saying we may be able to get to it in 2 to 4 years from now. No one has come up with a clue about how we're going to deal with specialty care. So, and I don't know of anybody else. The issue around how to deal with pharmacy, which we heard at our board meeting several weeks ago, is 25% of our budget. So the idea of the compact was overly aggressive when 2 years ago it said by 2024 we would get at 70% of the of healthcare in Oregon would be under some type of value-based purchasing agreement. There's no way, personal opinion, no way that can happen in 2024. And to hold now, again, you don't have to worry about holding Kaiser to this because it's an integrated system and it actually helps move things along. But from OEB's perspective, I don't know PEB well enough. For MODA to be able to get here is an impossibility. So what you've done with them, with MODA, is if you have this in place, don't spend any time taking any information, just have them write you the check, because it's an impossibility for them to get here. Does that mean that we should just ignore this whole thing? I don't think so. But what I would propose for at least the first year would be for them to be for all the plans, the 3 plans, Providence, MODA, and Kaiser Permanente, to report on what's happening with all of their lines of business. I'm sorry, not their different types of services, primary care, specialty care, and hospital, and for that matter, pharmacy, and see how much of it is in the value-based purchase context. So that's my get off my soapbox, but it's having been following the process, I have no idea how this would happen.
So I'm going to step in and say I agree with Tom, and I would just add to that once we have a baseline that we have in our annual negotiation a reasonable increase towards the ultimate goal. So they're motivated to keep working at it, not to abandon it, but we recognize the complexity of the landscape.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Yeah, Sean, go for it.
So I disagree with you guys. We've been measuring this for like half a decade now. And it's not like this is just dropping out of the sky. We've been talking about it for basically a decade to try to get this done. And now that it's becoming, there's money attached. Now everyone's like, well, it's impossible. And it's impossible because we've been dragging our feet for so long and not doing it. So there's never going to be a time when everyone's ready. And there's never going to be a time when the system just naturally makes it happen without any pain. The only thing that's going to make it happen is by putting some hard, guardrails down, be like, this is what we're doing. And you have little faith that they can do it. I have very little faith that it's going to happen at all until the rubber meets the road and like actual money gets on the line. Because I don't think there's a will to do it. I think there's systems trying to resist and is defending itself, almost like an immune system's attacking some sort of virus or something. They don't want it as a system. So I disagree. Like I will be overruled, but just so you know, like I feel like we should be aggressive about pushing the system to perform in a way that it should, and it has seen this coming for a long time.
Well, I don't have at my fingertips where we are, but I think on the OEB side, Sean, we've been seeing part of our expenses going to value-based payment, and we've been seeing an annual increase for the last couple of years. So
on PEB's side, we've been going down. So they're backtracking. So not impressed.
We should get a report for the next one, but I think we've been seeing an increase. So obviously we've got different data sets to draw our observations from. So as the Queen said, recollections may vary.
Well, and to note for the health authority in terms of the sort of the source of truth, or the sort of single data source related to value-based payment levels, we do use the provider payment arrangement file that is submitted to APAC, and so they do annual reporting on VBP levels, including for PEB and OEB by carrier, and so that is kind of our our official source for where we would look at our percentages. And I can get an update for you. I do believe, so the most recent, I do believe we are due for an update, and I apologize. It is leaving my mind exactly when the next refresh of that data will be available, but it is forthcoming.
I think it would be helpful if we just had some hard data to go along with this proposal, and then it gives us a better chance to ratify it.
I do want to note
Kimberly,
that
I agree.
Oh, okay. And I do want to note that in the renewal response, none of the carriers said that we can't do this, that this isn't possible. What their comments related to was really around different approaches that would give different levels of consideration to different types of care, say primary care versus hospitals, or different land categories, say 3A versus 3B, and kind of tier the fees at risk. None of the carriers responded that they were unwilling. We didn't hear that at all.
Okay.
I appreciate that clarification. And yeah, I mean, if it makes sense to have some nuance, you know, I look to staff to like, you know, if it makes sense to have some, you know, I understand it's not a monolith that the entire system's identical across the system, but that we're heading in the right direction is my priority.
And I think we're in agreement with you on that.
Yeah, and my comment also is not around that this isn't the right direction to go. I'm just saying I've just been in the process where all the entities, at this work group, they're trying to figure out ways to move the state along the path to continuing to expand value-based purchasing. And it's turned out to be really, really difficult. And elements of the health system are in crisis. One of which is our hospitals. That's just the reality. You can look at financial reports and things like that to see what's happened. So it's for a multitude of reasons, but some in their control, some not. Ali, you've been at the meetings. The last couple ones have sounded pretty dire to me.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say that, Tom. I was at the same meeting you were at, and they're really wrestling with this, just like this group is. And I don't know that there's any easy answer. We're in, a time and place that's kind of wasn't expected, a few years ago, even, with the numbers around inflation and workforce and all these other issues that are currently in place. So there's no easy answer. And I think, the intent, I think, all along was to align with that compact as much as possible. And I think that's probably still a good policy. But, I don't know that they're any closer to an answer right now.
But I think I want to honor what Sean is saying, which is this is important stuff, and we can't ignore it. And so let's again, my counter to having dollars at risk for now is a requirement to have clear metrics around how much of the our carrier's expense is within these value-based payment methodologies, and they can describe what land level they are, 2, 3A, 3B, whatever, and for us to track it over time, and to see whether or not we're advancing the ball.
Yeah, and yeah, I hear you. And I guess my point is, to that, I think we've been doing that, right? I mean, Margaret, there's an official way that we measure the thing, right?
Yeah,
And it,
there's, I believe, 2 years of APAC
yeah. So we've
published
already got,
reporting on
that's
this so far.
that's already done. So
Sean, I
we've
haven't
already,
seen, we have not discussed that ever at OEB.
okay,
We've
well,
never looked at that data.
so that would be a good thing for you guys to do. But
Yeah.
the point is, we don't need to back off and say like, well, the first year we'll need to measure it, because like we are measuring, like collectively, like as a state. So it's just a matter of like pulling it. So I guess that's my point of like, that doesn't feel like a way forward, because we're already, that's status quo. Instead, I guess like if our goals are too ambitious because of like, you know, as they say, fortunes of war, or whatever, you know, like reality has hit and such. Okay, well, let's talk about that. But I think what we're experiencing is like backtracking, like we're not making progress, we're losing progress. And so,
I disagree from at least OEB perspective.
well, I mean, we can look at the data, like that's just kind of a fact. Like from one year to the next, there's less. So,
well,
I think we have some agreement that at our next meeting, some data will be pulled and presented.
I recommend we just push this to next month where we can have a little more decision based upon some data. I don't have enough data to say what I would recommend one way or another, because I'm hearing board members say different things, and it's just outside my area of expertise. So
yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
There are, so APAC does have reports online for 2 years. I believe it's 19 and 20 out there currently. So I can send those as a follow-up to this meeting, so that you can have those to take a look at your leisure, and then we can absolutely include some time on the next agenda as well.
I thought it was 2023. What's 2019 or 2019 and 2020 have to do with anything?
Well, I'm noting the reporting that's out there, and I do believe, and I will get a date for you on when the next update is to be released, because I do know that that's forthcoming.
Okay. How about 2022? I'm giving you a hard time. I'm sorry.
So my understanding of the way the reporting works. No, I know. So 2022, calendar year 2022, I believe it's the full, so the data is reported because it's related to contract, provider contract arrangements. It's a specific type of data file. It doesn't just comes from claims data. It's a specific data file that carriers have to create. And so I believe, if my memory serves, the 2022 data, they won't report until like 9 or 10 months after the plan year, the calendar year ends. So I don't even think OHA will have the 2022 data in-house until fall of 23. I think, which is why I believe that the 2021 data came, that OHA has the 2021 data as of a couple months ago, which is why I think that the reporting update for that year should be coming soon. And I will clarify the time frame, because soon is vague, but it is it is imminent. But duly noted, Tom, I understand your question. Certainly the data lags can be a little bothersome, to say the least.
Okay.
Right. So that is all we have for formal agenda topics. I think, Rose, did we have any public comment for today?
No, no public comment. Nope.
Okay. Any final comments before we adjourn? Done. We are adjourned.
We appreciate you, Margaret. Everybody, thank you.
Oh, yes, likewise. Thanks to all of you. Have a nice evening.